22nd in order. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Philseth. Councilmember Niss. Councilmember Scharf. Vice Mayor and Chair Schmidt. 3 present.
Good. That brings us to the first item on the agenda, which is always oral communications. People who want to speak to the Finance Committee on an item that is not on the agenda. And I do have 2 cards. Annette Glankoff, followed by Stephanie Martinson.
Good evening, council members. Tonight I'm going to follow up on the letter that I sent you, and I'm speaking with my hat on as a board member of Racing Hearts. And the request that we have is to put 25 more AEDs, automated external defibrillators, in the 2015-16 budget. And we're not doing this in the vacuum. We have run this by both Chief Nickel and Chief Burns, and they're very much in sync with us. So I'll talk just a little bit about this, and then Stephanie Martinson, who's the president of the board, will come up and talk a little bit about the science and life-saving value for this, as well as talk to the maintenance contract. So that is my request. We'd like to see it in the budget. And where would we put them? Well, we actually looked for the cars in Palo Alto that drive around most frequently, and they're out in the public to service anyone that might have an accident. And the attachment that I sent you has the 22 locations of the cars that are most driven that do not have an AED, including 9 from police. And there are 3 in park locations, especially the parks where we might have a lot of incidences of sudden cardiac arrest, parks where you have lots of sports. So 1 near the Cubberley playing fields, 2, the Magic Bridge, which has gotten so much wonderful press in the news, and also a second one at Greer Park. If we do this, this will bring us up to the standard of care, and Stephanie, of other surrounding communities, such as Mountain View and Sunnyvale, and Stephanie will talk to the life-saving value of AEDs. And it's hard to put a value on life, but to have an AED there when it's needed in a very fast, rapid amount of time can mean the difference between life and death. So we'd be happy to answer questions, and I think I have the entire report for you, and thank you for consideration.
Great, thank you very much. Stephanie Martinson.
Hi, thank you. I'm Stephanie Martinson. I'm the founder and president of Racing Hearts here in Palo Alto. And I wanted to just say why we're asking for another 25 AEDs. So based on our initial slot, we were able to get 52 AEDs put in Palo Alto. And it's pretty amazing the very first year's results, our impact results. They were used 9 times. Those 52 AEDs were used 9 times. That means 9 times they were given to someone who has had a sudden cardiac arrest. It's pretty amazing considering that our statistics of survival have been unchanged since the 1960s, 5 to 10%. And with an AED, access to an AED, the survival rate can go up to about 85% based on the arrhythmias. So like Annette said, we truly believe that the 25 AEDs will bring the standard of care to match Mountain View. We just put all Mountain View police cars all have an AED, and a gold standard is Sunnyvale, where they just actually had a pretty significant save via the pulse point, and it was all over the media. So we really want to see Palo Alto being heart healthy and active living with heart disease. A lot of people don't know that they have it. So it's an easy win for our community. Happy to answer any other questions, but thank you so much for this consideration.
Jim Griffiths was sitting next to me at some event, and he was showing me on Pulse Point where all the AEDs are.
Yes.
Do we have that show up in Palo Alto? Because he indicated that he had to input them. There was a few that were left, and that I didn't get the sense that they were showing up in Palo, but maybe they are. I just was unclear.
So we did, about a year and a half ago, a Spot the Box campaign to map and locate all the AEDs, and those results all went to Pulse Point. So we are absolutely actively collaborating with Pulse Point via our AED spotter, which is just an educational tool, but the Pulse Point, yes, they should be getting all the data.
Okay, thank you. And then for Lalo, so are those AEDs currently in the budget, or would that be something finance would have to take up?
Unfortunately, I'm not in the chain of the correspondence. I'd have to look into it. Walter will be joining us later tonight, so I can also check in with him as he joins us for the items on the agenda in the future. If they, let's assume that they are not on the agenda, then you as a committee have the flexibility to consider those in your deliberations in the month of May when you take on the budget hearings and
Yeah,
the public
I
safety
believe
night.
they're not in the budget now, so it would be an addition.
So that would be in May, we'd take a look at that.
Correct.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah, since it's not on the agenda, we cannot discuss it tonight, but thank you very much for bringing it up. This brings us to the action items, and I will mention to staff and the public that we are under some time constraints tonight, so we do want to be direct with each item on the agenda. First item on the agenda is the UAC's recommendation that we adopt a resolution on the 2016 gas financial plan, including no rate changes.
Thank you very much, Chair Schmidt. I'm Valerie Fong, Utilities Director, and I have with me Resource Planner Eric Kennison, who will give you a one-slide overview of our proposed rates for the gas utility.
Good evening, members of the Finance Committee. The gas utility financial plan that we're putting before you tonight is the same one that we actually brought to you back in March, with a no proposed rate change for FY 2016 and a hypothetical change of 7% in FY 2017. And we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Let's see, I did have one. Question, I guess, on page 20 of the report, which is packet page 33. I guess I note that the gas utility has no rate increases this year, but they are projecting into the future substantial increases of 744 over the next 3 years. And figure 7 shows our reserves. Is that correct? And appropriately, I guess we are dropping the rate stabilization reserve, since the utility now tracks market and consumers will see that. But we do have a decline in operational reserves between 2016 and 2018. So with a 0 rate increase, I know you had some discussion in the UAC as to whether that should be averaged out over the 2 years or postponed for a year. The reserve decline might indicate some argument to have an earlier thing. Is there a comment on that?
There is a slight drop to the operations reserve, but we're still within our target levels for the reserves. So we have enough health in the overall reserve structure to keep that going. Plus, the short-term risk assessment level relative for the gas fund is very low since we do track market. So we have quite a bit of wiggle room in this particular fund to allow for such things.
Yeah. I guess the unknown side is how much we will be paying into the regional distributor for upgrading. And I know they keep running into troubles and finding they need more and more. Your view is that we are in decent shape and will not have some surprises from that side.
Well, you're referring to the transportation costs that related to that. That case is yet to be settled. So, I mean, that's the other benefit actually of waiting a little bit on this, where we know that it's going to be going up, but the exact magnitude of it has yet to be seen. So giving us one more year will allow us to better track that to what actually comes down from PG&E.
Okay, so you don't have details yet on what their long-term program is? But
No, I mean, we have estimations and guesstimates, but we don't have the final yet.
yeah, but your expectations are that will be a substantial,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, I bring that up because your chart on page 3 shows increases in all utilities next year, which are substantial, and I guess we don't want too many surprises on the horizon. Okay, if there are no other questions, is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Any comment, further discussion on that?
Nope.
All in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you, and that brings us to item 2 on the agenda, the UAC recommendation on the electric financial plan, including no rate changes. Staff?
Thank you very much, Chair Schmidt. Valerie Fong, Utilities Director, and I have with me Senior Resource Planner, John Abenschein, also our Rates Manager. And he has also a one-slide overview for you.
Good evening, council members. So we're also proposing no rate increase for our electric utility this year. The last time we changed rates was back in 2009. We're proposing no change for our utility this year. We're going to take the next year and finish up a cost of service study to be ready for a 6% rate increase forecasted for July 1st, 2016, and another 6% for July 1st, 2017. We've also, I know there's been concern about the impact of the drought on our supply costs because of our low hydroelectric generation. We've run scenarios on we've run 3-year drought scenarios, and we can discuss that if you have questions. The main driver for the increases in costs over the next, in ongoing costs over the next couple of years have to do with increases in transmission costs and the cost of new renewable projects that are coming online for us to fulfill our carbon neutral plan. So that pretty much summarizes it. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
So I have one
Thank you.
question.
Yeah.
We have tiered rates in our electricity, correct? If we're thinking of pushing more electrification, maybe we should start to examine whether, especially if we're going to continue to always have carbon neutral electricity, I think we should examine why we have tiered rates and how that plays into our strategies of having people use electricity, frankly, and if it's carbon neutral, you know, how do we feel about that? And I think that's a discussion we should have at some point.
Thank you.
Councilmember Filson?
Just real in high-level terms, how sensitive is this to assumptions about how long the drought lasts, and if it's sensitive, what did you assume?
It is sensitive in the sense that each year the drought can add pretty significant costs. What we would have to do if we get into an extended drought, the plan would be next year we would have to have an additional, we would probably come to you with a hydroelectric rate adjuster, a temporary adder that would account for those extra costs. In FY17, we would probably draw down reserves and recover part of the additional costs through an adder. And then if the drought continued for yet another year, we'd have to increase the adder. And at that point, our reserves would be pretty well drawn down, but the adder would be at the point where we could sustain indefinitely, sustain our financial position indefinitely.
So if you just make sure I understand what you just said, which is these numbers assume that we're going to have wet years in the next couple of years, and if we don't, then these numbers will go up.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that a little bit. I was looking through the attached financial sheet, and it indicates that there was a drop in reserves during fiscal year 2015 of about 17 million. Now that was primarily because of the extra cost of supply, is that right?
About 5 million of that was related, a planned drawdown of reserves, and the remaining 11 million was related to the drought. So we had a hydroelectric stabilization reserve, which is a complicated way of saying a drought reserve, essentially. And that was at 28 million, where by the end of FY15, it will be at 17 million. And if we have another year of drought, it doesn't rain this upcoming winter, that would likely drop, it would drop again pretty significantly.
Now, since we're talking about hydro, 2016 starts July 1st. I would think that the worst impact of the drought is going to be felt in those first 6 months. But there's no snow, so there's no stored water, so we will run low soon. So it seems to me the numbers for 2016 should show the fact that the impact of the drought is going to be felt heaviest.
And we do. In fact, we aren't even projecting normal hydro for this upcoming winter because the reservoirs are so low. So it is taken into account in the FY16 projections. That said, we did our projections in January when we started this process, and so FY16 will probably end up being a little bit worse than we're projecting right here.
Yeah, I guess I would say if the drought cost 11 million in 2015, it probably would have an equal impact on 2016.
It would, but we've already taken into account some of that in our projections. So it may be more like a $5 to $6 million hit rather than an $11 million hit.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned, like the gas, of all of a sudden saying, well, for 2016, we've got to recover some of this and we'll find our rates rising across the board. And
I hear you. I think one of the challenges we have with the electric utility is that we really need to finish a cost of service study before we change rates. And so we would not recommend changing rates this year.
Yeah, I guess the court system is pushing off that date where you can do an effective cost of service. Okay, so my hesitancy on this is not the rate increases you have or your explanation of reserves, but just the unknown risks that we face next year, where we already know that in water and wastewater we have substantial increases coming. Okay, is there a motion by my fellow council members?
Move to proceed with the recommendation.
Second.
Any comments?
Nope.
All in favor?
I have one comment.
Yes.
Pray for rain.
I just have one quick question. When did you say the cost of service study is likely to be done?
We think we will bring it to the UAC in June or July.
So we're going to come to you with a policy discussion, in
that's
July, and then Finance Committee probably in September. UAC in July, and Finance Committee probably in August or September, depending on when your meetings are available.
So that's what I was going to ask. You were going to have the policy discussion about what we want to see in the cost of service study.
Yes.
And you expect that to take all the way to September before we hear about that? So then the cost of service study would then take, what, another 9 months or?
We're going to try and nail that down before next budget cycle, so probably by mid-January or so.
So the cost of service
We've
study-
done cost of service studies that quickly before.
So it'd be 2 or 3 months only to do a cost of
That's
service
right.
study? Okay. All right, thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to take just a second to recognize a couple of folks in the audience who also worked very hard on this. Davian and Jane Ratchie from Utilities. So thank you.
Okay, and there are a couple speakers on item 3, so before we close it.
Mr. Hayes wanted to change his to 4 instead of 3.
Oh, okay. Okay, first speaker is Barbara Klausner, followed by Joe Jaras. Oh, okay. We are early. So that finishes item 2, and we move on then to item number 3. Human Relations Committee recommendation on the HISRAP process. Welcome, staff.
Thank you, Chair Schmidt and council members. It's good to be here once again to speak about the HISRAP process for this year. I'm Minka Vanderswag. I'm the manager of the Office of Human Services. And I have with me tonight Greer Stone, a Human Relations Commissioner, and Jill Onan, who is the chair of the Human Relations Commission. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the staff report and have the HRC commissioners chime in on the aspects of the allocations process that they were involved with. So just for a quick overview of the process, we used the same priority of needs as we did from our last cycle. As you may remember, for that cycle, the HRC actually completed a fairly extensive human services needs assessment. And in this last cycle, we did a supplemental needs assessment and reviewed the priority of needs and felt those to be still current needs that they wanted to include in the RFP process. In addition to our current providers, we looked at our priority of needs and other community agencies in Palo Alto or agencies that served Palo Alto. So we actually sent out RFPs to 33 agencies. We got 15 replies. The requests exceeded the available funds by $617,000, more or less, but $500,000 of that was from one agency who requested a very large grant, and that was a new agency. So the applications were reviewed by a subcommittee of 3 HRC members and staff as well. So the recommendation that the HRC is bringing forward to you tonight, if you look on your worksheet, that is column J. And that is a recommendation for the distribution of $425,594. Are you able to find that?
It should be packet page 117.
Thank you, Lalo. But after the HRC met and made this recommendation, the budget staff was able to add a recommendation for a 2.6% CPI increase to his RAP. And again, that happened after the HRC meeting. So you'll notice in column G that we listed what those recommendations would be given that 2.6% increase. And that was just given across the board. So tonight, we have the HRC recommendation and we have the staff recommendation. Since the HRC didn't vote on it, they didn't vote on the staff recommendation, but I can assume that they are happy with a 2.6% increase, and given the opportunity to vote on it, they would have. So I'd like to just have Commissioner Stone as the representative from the HRC Allocations Committee. So that is the committee that thoroughly studied all the applications that came in and made the funding recommendations, just so you understand the rationale of the funding that is being recommended. So Commissioner Stone?
Yes. Good evening, Council. Thank you. So I'll try to make this short and sweet. Essentially what the subcommittee decided on was that we really had a preference for continuing the funding that all previous recipients of HISRAP funding received. So we truly favored those organizations and trying to keep stability. So what we looked at was making sure all returning HISRAP agencies got essentially the same funding as they had in the previous cycle. We wanted to do that to maintain stability so that way they'd be able to continue to do the great work that they've already been doing. We ended up having about $4,000 extra after that decision to work with, because of Mayview Community Health Center was only requesting $25,000, and that was about $4,000 less than they had received in the previous cycle. And so with that $4,000, we decided what we wanted to focus on, and there were two agencies that came up: La Comida, which received extra funding of about $300. The reasoning for that decision was La Comida gets most of its funding from the county, but in order to continue receiving that funding, they need to receive about 10% of their funding from a local agency, so Palo Alto. So that $300 increase was to ensure that they were at that 10% minimum. Then we looked at adolescent counseling services, ACS, and provided them with the rest of it, which was about $3,713. We favored that group because, as we all know, the issues we've been having in the community around youth mental health, the teen suicides that have affected us over the past years, and ACS is continuing to do such a great job on that. And we believe that to show their support, to show the youth in the community our support, we wanted to provide extra funding for them to continue doing the work that they do. So that is why only two agencies received increases, and the rest essentially stayed at the rates they were at the previous funding cycle. We also discussed in the subcommittee ideas for if council were to increase the HISRAP budget by 5%, 10%. We discussed at that time areas that we would like to, the agencies that we would like to favor or priorities that we would like to have, but we didn't bring that up to a vote at the entire commission meeting because waiting to see what council would do. So great, thank you.
Great, and then Chair Anand just wanted to speak to you regarding an aspect of the staff report, which was the initial study that an intern did for us last year as to assess human service funding and needs in other communities. So Chair Anand?
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, council members. As you know, HISRAP has been a very important long-term community resource. It goes back to the 1980s. And for many years it received regular increases, but in around 2003 those increases stopped and funding was either cut or became stagnant, and we kind of had a decade of languishing. So that has really had a long-term impact on our nonprofits' ability to serve the community as well as they would like to. And over the past couple of years, Council has been incredibly responsive and generous in adding to this program and helping us get caught up. And I'd like to, at this time, thank staff for the recommendation for the CPI increase and thank council for all the recent increases to his RAP. The fact is, though, that we're still not quite caught up to where we might have been if that lost decade had never occurred. And we'd like to draw your attention to some things that our intern discovered for us. We had been asked by several council members, well, what do other communities do? How do other communities fund human services? So we looked around, and there was sort of good news and then maybe some challenging news. So the good news is that we are way ahead of our nearby neighbors. Palo Alto spends more on human services than any of the surrounding communities, which is wonderful. But when we looked a little bit outside to communities that might be a little more comparable in terms of culture and income, we chose Bellevue, Washington, which is sort of a, I think it's sort of a exclusive community for Microsoft millionaires is what I think it is, and Berkeley, our sister city across the bay. We found that although the per capita income is not as high as in Palo Alto, they actually spend more on human services than we do. And we started looking at that a little bit more seriously and looking also at the history of the HISRAP funding. So some things that we're kind of wanting to bring to your attention are, again, we're not caught up yet to where we were even 10 years ago. So it would be wonderful, in addition to this CPI increase, if council could consider some additional funding. We have at times struggled with how to respond to crises in the community. We're aware of the current teen suicide clusters. Last year we had a crisis where a very essential food program was in danger of shutting down. That's a food program that serves 100 needy people a day, was going to go away because that provider could not afford the food anymore. And we've had a crisis with the homeless encampments over at Cubberley. And all of this kind of bubbles up when our nonprofits are not funded adequately to deal with some of these emergencies in a more proactive way. And then we have to get reactive, which is really, really difficult. So we'd like to just put that forth, and the HRC would love to engage with council on how to get HISRAP on a more sustainable, more long-term kind of footing, because it has served the community so well for the last 30 years, and we want to see HISRAP stay a vital program and continue to serve the community very, very well. So as I said, I think that at this point, we are not even receiving 1% of the general fund on human services. With everything combined, we're still a little bit short of 1%. And so there's some aspirations that the HRC would like to move forward with, and we're hoping that we'll have your support in doing that.
Thank you. Let's see, I do have 3 members of the public who want to speak, but if council members have questions beforehand. Okay, let me call on the public. Barbara Klausner first, followed by Joe Jaras. Could you get the clock?
Good evening. I'm Barbara C. Klausner, and I am the Executive Director of Dreamcatchers. And I'd like to thank the Finance Committee for their support in prior years and encourage them to certainly move forward with this recommendation on HISRAP funding. I just wanted to let you know a little bit about Dreamcatchers. We are a highly leveraged organization. We're a great example of a town-gown partnership, and I believe that we provide exactly what Palo Alto wants and needs in terms of providing community support. What are we? We provide 6,000 hours of free tutoring to low-income middle school students in Palo Alto. We've been around for 7 years. It's not a drop-in program. It's a year-long commitment. And how does this happen? We're highly leveraged. It's the first year we have a budget of over $100,000 because we have Stanford students who are undergraduates who volunteer as these year-long tutors. And this year, for the first time, we have local high school students from Gun Pally and Castellea. So it's a wonderful partnership. We've also offered a lot of parent meetings. So talk about Palo Alto community. Our parent groups our parents are pretty much not just low income, but Spanish speaking, not having attended college. And so we have a really special group of families who, as we say, can provide the emotional support for their children, but can't really provide the material and resource support, as one of our Dreamcatchers board members, Professor Amato Padilla, described it the other day, meaning that they want to help their kids, but they don't have the kind of background that most Palo Altans have. In case you don't know, 4 out of 5 Palo Altans have a bachelor's degree, 1 out of 2 have a graduate or professional degree. Average income is probably, supposedly, $160,000. I'm guessing it's really higher. Our family's income about $35,000 to $40,000 a year. So these funds are really valuable to us, and I think they provide something valuable to the Palo Alto community that the city wants to be a part of. I think it's, we're a leader in green initiatives, and I think that Palo Alto wants to continue to be a leader in equity of opportunity as well, and not cede that crown to another nearby community. Dreamcatchers offers something that no one else in the community, no one else provides to the Palo Alto community, so I do want to make that clear. HISRAP funding is really critical. So thank you very much.
Good, thank you, and it's good to hear stories from the community. Next speaker is Joe Jarez, to be followed by Harry Schupitzer.
Hi, I'm Joe Jarez. I'm Supervisor of Social Services at Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And I know some of you have heard me before, but I'm very passionate about our agency, and I am the social worker who sees all the newly visually impaired people in Palo Alto who get referred. We see very many people. We're the place that doctors send their patients, and their optometrists and ophthalmologists and other doctors when they don't know how to help them with glasses, or they're beyond the place where other simple visual things like glasses and contact lenses will assist them. So clients come to us for comprehensive rehabilitation services so that they can remain independent and age in place, hopefully and safely. I got a call today about a Palo Alto senior who's driving around and shouldn't be, and who didn't know what resources were available, needs to have comprehensive help in being able to maintain his life in his own home, if possible. I go out and meet with the clients and set up a plan with them based on their individual needs for assistance with things like cooking, with taking their medication safely, with accessing their telephones, with being able to walk safely in the neighborhood and even around the house. We do comprehensive work with them on any needs and frustrations that they're having related to their vision loss. We have a clinic that provides low vision optometry services to help people to get the kind of help that they're not able to get in community optometry services, with magnification, dealing with glare and contrast and all those issues, so that they can function as safely as possible. We provide transportation, connections to transportation resources so that people won't feel they need to drive when they're not safe driving. We educate our clients about their eye conditions and teach them what they can do to be safe. We also teach assistive technology to enhance independence, and assistive technology is really, really important for people who are visually impaired, and there's lots of new technology for them. We also provide emotional support, counseling, support groups, classes on adjusting to vision loss. We have a branch of the Health Library from Stanford and a store with aids for people who are visually impaired, and we try to help clients in any way that they need assistance with their loss of vision. We work with school children as well as, we work with all ages of folks, and we have a youth group and a transition program for teens who are going off to college. And we serve all clients regardless of their ability to pay. We serve many different cultures and also very many people who are not able to pay. So thank you for all your support in the past, and we appreciate that you will allow us to have the increase that's been proposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thanks for the good stories. Next speaker is Harry Schupitzer, followed by Georgia Basil.
Hello. Well, first of all, my name is Harry Schupitzer. I work for Momentum for Mental Health. I'm a homeless outreach specialist. And my job in Palo Alto and throughout Santa Clara County is to go out on the streets and engage with the unhoused population. My job is to assess people out there on the streets and find out what their need is. I try to navigate them to the proper agency. If it's the mental health, then I give them the 1-800 number. That's access to mental health here in Santa Clara County. I work in the courts here. It's called PAR, Palo Alto Review, and it's where we work with Palo Alto PD, Mountain View PD, Los Altos, and Sunnyvale. And we work with Downtown Street Team, DADS, Department of Alcohol and Drug Services, the OC, and we work with the DA, the public defender, and judges. And those who have contact with the police, they have tickets like for smoking in public, drunk in public, paraphernalia, anything but a felony, we're able to work with them and rebuild those bridges to their family members and get them off the streets and get them into housing, even jobs. And it's a great agency. Matter of fact, yesterday in court, San Rafael came down to learn what we're doing here in Palo Alto in PAR. And Brad Zook, an ex-captain with Palo Alto PD, was the one that went up there years ago and got the information and brought it down here. And we were able to start it here. And it's doing very well. And I just want to thank the council and his rep for the funding that we're getting so I can continue my work with Momentum and with the City of Palo Alto. And it's all about networking and engaging with the public. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Keep up the momentum. Our last speaker is Georgia Basile.
Good evening. You know my name, Georgia Basile. I'm the Directing Attorney of Senior Adults Legal Assistance, or SALA. We're a nonprofit law office. We provide free legal services to seniors countywide as well as here in Palo Alto. We target clients that are very low income or at risk of abuse or loss of independence. We currently receive HISRAP funding, and that funding has enabled us to expand our appointment sessions locally here at Avenidas and Stevenson House, and we thank you. We're requesting funding to continue services next year, and we do thank the HRC and the staff for the recommendation for funding. As you probably know, seniors are the fastest growing segment of the population, so we're really pleased that the HISRAP priority of needs list includes services for seniors, including legal assistance and elder abuse prevention. We at SALA can attest that this is a great need. We continue to see seniors with legal problems related to the public benefits they depend on for their very livelihood, Social Security, SSI, Medicare, Medi-Cal, in-home supportive services. These are legal problems. We're not helping them fill out applications. We're doing appeals. We continue to see seniors whose housing is in jeopardy, seniors facing eviction, seniors needing reasonable accommodations because of disabilities. We continue to see seniors that are victims of elder abuse, physical elder abuse, usually by someone living in their home, someone they know. Adult children, grandchildren, live-in caregivers, tenants they rent out rooms to, even their neighbors. And we're able to get restraining orders, elder abuse, domestic violence, civil harassment, whatever it takes to hopefully end that abuse. And we continue to see seniors that need to do very basic planning for end of life, for loss of capacity through powers of attorney and advanced health care directives. It helps them age in place, prevent conservatorships, and prevent institutionalization. And it also assists them with some conditions related to affordable housing, because some senior housing projects for low-income seniors are asking the residents to have some arrangements in place should they die or become disabled living there, so that someone could step in and take over. So we're very pleased that our legal planning can help them with that. But without our assistance, our clients couldn't navigate the legal system, the public benefits system. They couldn't represent themselves in court, and they certainly couldn't draft very simple powers of attorney or advanced health care directives. So we really do appreciate the support we've gotten from HISRAP over the years. We were founded here in 1973, and we've been serving you since that time, and your support really means a lot to us. So thank you very much.
Good, and thank you for coming personally to share your stories, everyone here. My colleagues, questions, comments? Councilmember Scharf.
Sorry about the cough. One of these days it'll go away. I want to thank you both for your hard work on the HRC. You know, it's been 5 years now. Every year the HRC comes forward with the recommendations, and I think you guys do a really good job vetting it. And you know, I see no reason to change any of the recommendations you guys have made. I think they're good ones, and you know, I think the organizations you're giving to are good. I know in the past there's been some controversy over that, but I mean, I think you guys have done a good job, and be fully supportive of the choices you've made. And I'll move the staff recommendation.
Good. That's comment on your second.
I just want to echo what Councilmember Scharf just said. I think this is good. I think you know, I think we can afford this, and so we should do it.
I second my colleagues, but I would like to offer an amendment. I was reading the New York Times the other day. I think I sent a copy to other council members. But it said that Silicon Valley is lagging behind other communities in dealing with the problem of homelessness. It said Santa Clara County and San Francisco County are among the leading 10 in number of homelessness. And in the share of those who are unsheltered, Santa Clara County comes in first in the country. And that's in a community that is experiencing unparalleled wealth in its housing and high per capita incomes. I think we have seen in our community over the last couple of years the impacts of that. I know the city is not the responsible public agency for dealing with it, but I think it is important that we do something. And his RAP is a way we have of doing it. But I guess with this special issue of homelessness, I would like to add an amendment that would add $100,000 to the his RAP budget, and that money to be targeted to homelessness, and the HRC to come back to us in May with a recommendation on how to most effectively use that, either to deal with some of the agencies who are dealing with homelessness, or to leverage the funds with the county on a North County initiative. So, is that acceptable, or?
So it's not acceptable. And I'm going to have to give a brief little speech now about why. So first of all, it's the county that has responsibility, and that's where that lies. And I think that's appropriate because it's a county-wide issue. When we had the Coverly issues in terms of dealing with the homeless crisis, frankly, that was out there, and I take issue with Commissioner Nan's characterization of that of having anything to do with the amount of homeless services we provided in terms of not enough money or anything of what caused that. I don't think that had anything to do with that. We actually, as a council, decided to give $250,000, correct me if I got the numbers wrong, but it was $250,000 for 2 years.
That's correct.
And we were going to use that locally in Palo Alto to help the homeless. And yet we couldn't come up with a way to do that. We couldn't get our organizations together. And so instead we just gave the money to the county. And so I don't see just coming up with another $100,000 and throwing money at without identifying an issue and without identifying a plan to do that. And I don't think that's what we should be doing. And I don't think we should be budgeting off the cuff and just say $100,000. I mean, I could say $200,000. I could say $50,000. I don't see it as the way to budget. I don't see it as the way to basically run a city. And I do appreciate the hard work, and I do think the 2.6% is the right number. I do think that we have been increasing this number every year. I forget, how much did we add last year?
You added $100,000, a 2.6% increase across the board, and
$100,000, right?
That's correct.
That was my recollection, that we made a big increase, and I don't think we should be making a big increase every year. I also think that when we went through this process, that it's a little incorrect to say that we haven't been, funding his RAP. I mean, his RAP gets more money now than it's ever gotten. And it depends on how you want to talk about it. If you think that the fact that the general fund goes up and has, frankly, pension and benefits are driving that in a huge way. And so to compare the way it was in terms of a 1%, given the enormous explosive growth in pensions and benefits, which account for, I don't know, Lala, if I say it wrong, you can correct me, but it's what, 70%, 65%?
It's about 64% salary and benefits. The general fund.
That it's not really appropriate to look at it that way. And I'm not saying that his RAP funding is necessarily at the right number or the wrong number, but you haven't come here today and made a compelling case to say why it should be increased. What you have told me is that we fund it, his RAP or social services, at least comparably to our surrounding cities. And I thought I read somewhere that we were third best or something for surrounding cities out of those 7 cities you chose. And the fact that you would need to go to Bellevue, Washington, struck me as really that we must be doing a good job. Now, I'd be really concerned about, frankly, going out of state and looking at that, because the way California is structured is it's the county's job to provide social services, not the city's. And that may or may not be true in the state of Washington. I have absolutely no idea how they run things. And then if we have to look at Berkeley, which I'm really glad we don't run our city the way Berkeley runs their city, frankly. I mean, I like Berkeley, but I'm glad we run our city differently. And so for Berkeley is not, to me, the way we should plan on running our city. So for those reasons, I'm
So it's not a friendly amendment. Is there a second to it?
I'm not going to second it.
Okay. Any further comment?
Yes, I was wondering if I could respond to a few of Councilmember Sharp's remarks, and he makes some very good points. I will say that there are some significant service gaps in our city in terms of serving the homeless. Like, for example, in Santa Clara County, there is no shelter that takes in families. So a homeless individual can be served, but a homeless family with young children cannot. There is no place to shelter them. Our local service providers have to do some very fancy footwork to try to find them services in our adjoining San Mateo County when this situation comes up, as it comes up approximately once a month or so. Here, I mean, we're talking children in Palo Alto sleeping in cars with their parents. That's a very concerning issue for the HRC. We don't feel in a community this abundant that children should be put at risk like that, and that's a service gap county-wide. So if some additional funds were made available to his RAP and targeted for homelessness, that is one of the issues that we would be working with Envision Shelter Network on solving. That could be used for emergency motel vouchers or anything that would get those families off the streets long enough for service providers to jump in to find longer-term housing opportunities for them. So there are issues like that that come up. In addition, we are struggling with the teen suicide crisis. We had a representative from Adolescent Counseling Service speak to us recently, and as of March of this year, ACS had already seen twice as many kids as they saw the whole of last year. The kids are really grieving and very stressed out about losing their friends and all of the stress that's been in the school system lately. ACS needs to hire more people to serve more kids, but our budgets are constrained. So again, if there were some additional money that were put into his RAP, there is an ongoing crisis that we could directly address with those funds, and it would go to very good use. So just to be aware that the city, as wonderful as Palo Alto is, does have its weak spots.
Good, thank you. With no further comment, I guess we'll have a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? And I will vote against it, just so there's the opportunity for the council to look at the issue.
So you were voting on the motion or the amendment?
On the motion, since
Okay.
there was not a second to the amendment. So that passes on a 2-to-1 vote with Councilmember Schmidt opposing. Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations on moving forward. Okay, and that brings us to item number 4, the Palo Alto Animal Services Audit. Staff, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'll go ahead and start with the introductions while we load up the PowerPoint. So, good Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Harriet Richardson, City Auditor, and with me is Human Bassina, Senior Performance Auditor. And in the audience are Dennis Truntz and Lisa Wahara, who also assisted on this audit. Okay, there we go. Thanks. So we're here tonight to present the results of the Palo Alto Animal Services audit. Okay, and to get started, so we had 4 audit objectives that we were looking at when we started this audit. We included this audit in our fiscal year 2015 audit work plan because of the animal shelter's ongoing financial deficit since the city lost its agreement with the Mountain View in November 2012 to provide animal control services. We prioritized this audit at the city, requested the city manager so that we could issue a report in time for the Finance Committee's and Council's discussion of the fiscal year 2016 budget. Our audit objectives were to determine appropriate areas of focus for the City Council and management based on Palo Alto resident and animal shelter customer opinions regarding the overall adequacy of Palo Alto Animal Services, the demand for keeping animal services local, and residents' willingness to financially support operational and facility improvements for animal services. We also looked at whether there are opportunities to increase animal services revenues and decrease its expenditures to make animal services more financially sustainable. We looked at whether Palo Alto effectively and efficiently planned and executed upgrades to the animal shelter to meet animal services goals and objectives, and the appropriateness of animal services organizational structure. In addition to our standard audit review of relevant financial and operational information and speaking with appropriate staff regarding operations, we believed that it was important to get a broader perspective of what residents want regarding animal services. To accomplish that, we contracted with the National Research Center to conduct a survey that focused only on Palo Alto Animal Services. The survey included 3 different groups. The first one was 1,500 randomly selected Palo Alto residents, households. And the second 2 were true groups of households that had a record of having used Palo Alto Animal Services. 678 of those households were in Palo Alto, and 822 were outside the city limits. The survey is at Appendix 2 of the audit report, and the results are interspersed throughout the report and shown in full in Appendix 3 of the report. Due to time constraints, we did not wait the survey responses prior to publishing the report, but we subsequently weighted the responses to each question, which adjusted the response to more accurately represent the demographics of the population. The At Places memo that you have in front of you provides results for the updated results for the selected survey questions that we analyzed. We wanted to also understand what other well-functioning animal services organizations do to be operationally and financially successful. So we toured other animal services organizations in the area and spoke with leadership at those organizations. Those included the Humane Society Silicon Valley, Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA, the Palo Alto Humane Society, and the Silicon Valley Animal Control Authority, which is commonly known as SAVACA. We benchmarked various aspects of Palo Alto Animal Services against these organizations, as well as with the San Francisco SPCA and the cities of San Jose and Sunnyvale. We also compiled and reviewed prior reports that the city has conducted over time regarding efforts to improve or rebuild the animal shelter. I'll now pass the presentation on to Human, who will present the audit finding.
Human Bassina, Senior Performance Auditor. The audit report includes one finding that discusses the challenges and opportunities facing animal services. as well as the need to make immediate changes and to develop a service model that will be financially sustainable over the long term. The graphic you see in this slide focuses on animal services' dire financial situation. The 10-year line on the chart shows that there was a significant decline in revenues in fiscal year 14, with an unequal decline in total expenditures. Although Palo Alto's general fund has subsidized animal services during each of the past 10 years, the subsidy increased significantly after Palo Alto lost the agreement with Mountain View in November of 2012, and the accompanying $400,000 in annual revenues. Further revenue decline was due to the temporary closure of the spay and neuter clinic in fiscal year 14, after the loss of both vet techs, which caused revenues to decline from about $190,000 annually to $47,000. Police department staff told us that they made significant efforts to retain the Mountain View contract, including attending Mountain View's city council meetings, but were not successful in persuading Mountain View to stay with Palo Alto. The red and green bars on the chart show the non-salary expenses remained stable during the 10-year period, while the blue bars show that the city implemented staffing reductions to address the budget deficit in fiscal year 14. The chart in the slide shows that donations and/or contracts for services comprise the majority of revenues for other animal service organizations in the area, but that Palo Alto Animal Services have limited revenue in each of these areas in fiscal year 14. Palo Alto's options for increasing revenues from these two primary revenue sources are limited for two reasons. First, there's a limited market share for contracts with other jurisdictions, and most of that market has already been captured by the other animal services organizations shown in this chart. Although other jurisdictions have discussed contracting with Palo Alto for animal control services, they have not followed through because we could not save them money or because of uncertainty regarding the future of Palo Alto Animal Services. Second, the city police restricts animal services' ability to solicit donations. The city policy restricts animal services' ability to solicit donations. Even if the policy were changed, resources would need to be dedicated to fundraising efforts. Although Animal Services has received donations from the Friends of the Palo Alto Animal Shelter, the city has not formalized its relationship with the Friends group. Other monetary donations, which are done through an online portal rather than through direct outreach efforts, have not been significant. Other opportunities to increase revenues exist, but are not likely to be a significant factor in cost recovery. These include efforts to increase resident awareness of services provided, adding evening and weekend shelter hours, participating in community adoption events, and providing animal licensing services to other jurisdictions. Having animal services provided locally is very important to Palo Alto residents and animal services customers. More than 80% of residents and animal services customers who responded to the survey we conducted think it is essential or very important for Palo Alto to provide key animal services. 83% of surveyed Palo Alto residents do not want to travel more than 10 miles to obtain animal services. More than 90% of survey respondents rated services as excellent or good for animal control, dead animal pickup, spay or neuter service, vaccinations, and licensing. The Animal Services Survey showed that Palo Alto residents support subsidizing Palo Alto Animal Services, particularly if they use the services during fiscal year 14. 77% of randomly selected Palo Alto residents who responded to the survey and 94% of residents who used the shelter in the past 12 months thought the city's general fund should subsidize animal services to the extent necessary to ensure that the city manages and provides oversight of a city animal shelter in accordance with best practices. These residents also favored developing public-private partnerships as an option. Neither the randomly selected residents or residents who used animal services favored making animal services 100% self-supporting or contracting out animal services. The animal shelter was built in 1972. It has outlived its useful life and does not meet modern standards of animal care. This has been likely a reason that other jurisdictions have been reluctant to enter into animal services agreements with Palo Alto. The shelter does not have sufficient space to meet animals' physical and behavioral needs, including separating incompatible animals. The kennels are cramped and some have sharp edges that are unsafe for the animals. The flooring is porous and cannot be cleaned to recognized sanitation standards. There is not a separate receiving and intake room, and some types of small animals are housed in the staff lunchroom, which presents a health hazard. The city has spent $1.7 million on capital improvement program projects since 2003, but the improvements provided only critical repairs and did not upgrade the shelter to meet modern standards of care. The city conducted a master plan study of the Los Altos treatment plant site, which included a proposal to build a new shelter at the site. There was no subsequent action to move forward with one of the proposed plans from that study. Palo Alto residents support facility improvements to improve the standard of animal care, as well as funding those improvements. Although residents who responded to the survey preferred refurbishing the existing shelter, that is not a viable option because the shelter is beyond its useful life. Although there was positive support for building a new shelter, it was much less favored than the refurbishment option. Residents who responded to the survey strongly favored fundraising and public partner partnerships as a way to pay for improvements. And although they also supported general fund subsidies, that option was much less of a preferred option for residents who had not used the animal shelter. Issuing bonds to pay for improvements was not a well-supported option. The audit report discusses proposals from the Palo Alto Humane Society that included financial and other support for a new or refurbished facility. The city has not acted on those proposals, but through our discussions with Palo Alto Humane Society, we learned that they are still committed to providing support to moving Palo Alto Animal Services into the future. Animal Services faces other significant challenges. First, the acting superintendent plans to retire in December. This position provides services that are essential to the city as it moves forward with acting on the council's policy decisions regarding animal services. However, we anticipate that recruiting a qualified replacement will be challenging because several points. The position requires specialized skills and management experience. The salary for the position isn't competitive with neighboring animal services facilities. There is a significant gap between the superintendent's duties and responsibilities and those of other positions in animal services, which limits the ability for other animal services employees to step into the position and be effective. There is uncertainty regarding animal services' future, which may cause qualified individuals to hesitate to apply and commit to the position. The police department's hiring process takes 3 to 6 months and includes a more detailed background check than what is required for other city employees. This process has resulted in disqualifying candidates in the past and could dissuade otherwise qualified candidates from applying. Secondly, the police department considers animal services an ancillary operation that is mostly self-managed with minimal coordination of activities and expertise with the rest of the police department. While there is no ideal placement for the animal services function, the audit report describes the pros and cons of various reporting structures for animal services that could help overcome both its financial and organizational uncertainties.
So we made 8 recommendations in the report, which we expect would be implemented over a period of time, as well as prioritized. Some of these definitely should be implemented before others. The recommendations identify ways to address the future success and financial viability of animal services and include assigning someone with management skills to work at animal services to guide it through the transition into the future. We think that this is a critical first step that must occur quickly if Council's intent is to keep an animal services function in Palo Alto. We recommended conducting a cost-benefit analysis of expanding animal services hours as a way to increase its revenues. However, we do recognize that increasing revenues through expanded hours is very unlikely to raise much more than a fraction of the revenues that were lost when the city lost the Mountain View contract. We recommended identifying a strategy to engage nonprofit organizations or other animal services organizations in discussions for operating the shelter. The city manager started this process before the audit began and continued it while we conducted the audit. We believe that using the results of those meetings in conjunction with the information in the audit report will provide valuable information to council as you make your decisions about the future of Palo Alto Animal Services. As part of that recommendation, we also recommend assessing the feasibility of separating the animal control activities from other shelter activities, leaving animal control as part of the police department and separating off the remaining functions of animal services. We also recommended assessing the feasibility of increasing revenues through fundraising, public-private partnerships, general fund subsidies, or bond initiative to build a new animal shelter that meets modern-day standards for animal care and safety. These are proven strategies for other animal services organizations and are the most likely way to allow animal services to remain an active function in Palo Alto. The primary reason we prioritize completion of this audit is that we anticipate that implementing the recommendations will require financial resources that are not currently in the animal services budget. Presenting this audit now will allow the city manager to propose the resources needed for fiscal year 2016 during the upcoming budget hearings. The city manager agreed with 7 of the 8 recommendations. Although he partially agreed with our recommendation regarding seeking the opportunity to provide animal licensing services to San Mateo County when its current contract expires, his action plan to assess that opportunity is appropriate, and we do not recommend any changes to his response. We completed this audit through collaboration and cooperation of many people, including some of who are in the audience tonight. We want to thank management and staff at the Palo Alto Humane Society Silicon Valley, Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA, Silicon Valley Animal Control Authority, the San Francisco SPCA, and the cities of Sunnyvale and San Jose for their contributions to the report. We also want to thank management and staff in the Administrative Services Department, the Community Services Department, including the former director, the Police Department, including Animal Services, the Public Works Department, and their city manager for their time, cooperation, and assistance during the audit. And then a special thank you to Human Busina, Lisa Wahara, and Dennis Toons for their hard work in completing this audit in such a short time frame to make it ready for discussion in the upcoming budget hearings. That concludes our presentation, and we're ready for any questions.
Thank you for your prompt delivery of an important audit. City Manager, do you have a comment on the audit and your comments made on the audit?
Happy to do so, and that's probably the best way for us just to take 5 to 10 minutes max, I think, here to respond and add to the auditor's report, put in some context. So first of all, I would say that the work of the auditor's office, this is this isn't casting aspersions on other audits, but this is the timing of this audit, the recommendations, the alignment they have with where our own data was pointing us is a great example, I think, of really being able to have an internal consultant within the organization come on board to dive deeper and again give her own their own independent analysis of the situation. And in fact, I think that you will find that the responses that we wrote to the audit were less passive than they sometimes are in responses to audits. They were both statements of agreement and an attempt to actually sort of state our intentions and the urgency of us really responding to recommendations that the auditor made. I also would just say that that the work that Cash and others did with the some of the very engaged and concerned and interested stakeholders and animal lovers in our community was worthwhile, was very worthwhile, and I think it's fair to say that I think we have a lot of agreement about the situation of animal services and the proposals that we have making going forward. So I think we just have 3 simple slides here that we were developing in real time. I was even getting up as we were talking, and Cash put these slides together. So first of all, we just wanted to go back in time and just sort of revisit the challenges of our animal shelter operation over the past years as reflected in the financial condition of the operation. And Lalo can maybe remember the actual fiscal year in which we were considering that the losses that we were seeing in animal control, in addition to the other kind of significant financial challenges we face as a city, really led us to suggest, and this was concurrent with us losing Mountain View, those of you who were on the council will remember, that we really ought to look at, in one sense, abandoning the shelter operation here and pursuing something similar to Mountain View or some other option. What year was that, Lalo? Do you remember? Pardon me? 11. So it was about, well, whatever year it was, 10 or 11. There was a lot of reaction from the community and a lot of effort to sort of intervene, do some fundraising and everything to, as a reflection of the desire to keep the shelter in town. And we had some improvement, but as you look at this, it was in 12, I think it would have been in FY13, you see this drop, and we, in one sense, had a net cost of that dropped to $420,000. Now, again, the 2 of you who were on the council at the time, I'm not sure that it really made it into the explicit motion from the entire council, but certainly the intent was, let's stay on this course, but we'd like to see us reach sort of a 0 cost over a couple of years' period of time. And unfortunately, if you look at the subsequent years, we're going in the wrong direction. I mean, we lost, in one sense, $800 and almost $900,000 in 14, an increase in 15, et cetera. So I think that those numbers, not only from the last kind of direction and comments we got from the council, are going in the wrong direction. They're really not. They're a reflection of the fact that the operation as we have it now structured just, in my view, clearly doesn't work. Not only the numbers, but the condition of the shelter, our ability to be thinking about how to retool, restructure the shelter and reinvest in it in a way, and not only that it is more self-supporting, but the conditions and the quality of care and the appeal of the shelter would be enhanced. And I think the auditor's research and everything showed pretty clear pattern that municipal operations are not looking very good as far as the operation of shelter, so clearly we've got to look at alternatives. Cash? So again, the heart of our response really is pretty simple, that we agree and we think we should retain the animal control officers. It's a good operation. It's actually something, a service that has been important to our 2 remaining partners, Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. And when I was talking with one of the city managers in the past month, he was saying, well, hey, what's going on with your animal services operation? And I said, don't worry. I mean, I think we've got good recommendations to come to council, and we're not looking, at least my recommendation would be to keep animal control, and that was important to them. That we agree that retaining a shelter in Palo Alto is the way to go, but we need a new model, and we need to spin that off. So the challenge we have is, the next slide, I think, that we are going to have a transition period between now and our ability to move to a new model. That's complicated by the fact that during the transition period, I think we lose the director of the shelter is retiring in December. So we obviously need to keep the shelter in operation, and we need to focus on developing a transition plan. And so these are only very, very rough estimates of our thought of what the staffing support, whether we're able to snag some folks from other shelters who've retired or something, or we need consultant assistance. There's some other sort of aspects of this when we get into the budget sessions with the Finance Committee, we can have more fully developed. But I think the main point is we would envision roughly a year period before we would be in a situation to, and I don't want to even commit to that year, but for planning purposes right now, before we could pursue spinning the shelter off to an existing not-for-profit or some new not-for-profit entity. And concurrent with that, we'd have to sort of backfill some staffing and keep the shelter in operation. So I did want to let you know, since you are hearing this as the Finance Committee, and in a couple of weeks you'll be reviewing this as it relates actively to the budget, that those transitional costs I have not included yet in the operating budget that we will present to the council. So pending what your thoughts and your recommendations are, that would be something we'd have to take up during the budget. And is there anything I left out? I think that
let's see, just a question then from tonight's meeting. My understanding of the role of the Finance Committee tonight is to accept the audit report. And City Manager, you had item 1 also as taking place tonight. So the Finance Committee's focus tonight should be on the audit as a whole and item number 1. Is that correct?
I think clearly the point as it relates to the audit as a whole, yes. I do think, though, that the manager's response to the audit is an integral part of the audit, and therefore I don't think it's outside the purview for the committee to signal us as far as some directions in preparation for the budget meetings yourself. We don't want to lose time. I mean, if somehow you said you just don't like my recommendation at all, or you want to go in some other direction, I think it would be helpful to know that tonight.
Good, thank you. Let's see, I do have some cards from the public, but if there are questions up front, yeah.
Sorry, I have a question. First of all, I want to thank the City Auditor's Department and Ms. Richardson. I thought that was a very clear and comprehensive assessment of this, and I thought it was really, really well done. So thank you very much. I just want to have a question for the City Manager. Do I understand, I want to make sure I understand what you said, which is there's the animal control function, which stays here, right? And then there's the shelter function. And your suggestion is that we continue to run the shelter function for some limited period of time while we look towards transitioning it out to some kind of other kind of partnership completely?
That is correct, the shelter, yes.
When we transition it out completely, would we transition sort of all the shelter out completely or just a part of it? And let me explain what I mean is that, you know, there's sort of some really short-term stuff that, you know, somebody turns in a stray dog and hopefully it gets placed within a few days, the owner calls up and finds it. Versus one of the things that, you know, sort of larger and, you know, professional private shelters do is scour the area for available animals to support an aggressive adoption and pet fairs program and so forth, right? If we transition the shelter activities out, would we retain a little bit of shelter for sort of lost animals kind of stuff, or would we contract that out too?
So, thank you. So, let me first of all say that our thinking during, and this wasn't your question, but our thinking during the transition was to really kind of stick to the knitting as it is right now and not distract ourselves from the task of moving to the new model. So the idea of expanded hours, trying to come into some other contracts, if those really could make sense, they could be accommodated, it's fine, but we don't want to dilute our attention. So that being said, I think that the way we would structure the request for proposals that we would put out might very well have both some specific options of how the shelter we'd like to see it configured. And we might even have an open-ended piece that would allow respondents to propose alternatives that they think would work the best with the rationale as to why it might work that way. So somebody very well might say, not only what you're saying, Councilmember Filson, they may come up with other ideas that are really important that would say, well, we think actually if the city somehow kept this in some way, or actually we're really good at that thing that exactly that you're talking about asking, and we would build that into our response in our model.
Thanks. Yeah. So I also want to thank the Auditor's Office for a job well done, and I appreciate the City Manager's comments here. I guess need a little more background, I guess. I was on the council when you first came with us to this, and the initial recommendation from the City's Manager's Office was to close the animal shelter, and it was both functions, right? Or was it just one of them? It was both the shelter and the animal control, and contracted out with a brand new animal shelter facility that had been built in.
That's right.
Where was
it's called Savaca, is the Silicon Valley.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think that we got really focused on the animal control piece in the recommendation, and of course, the response or backlash to the proposal was pretty significant, as I recall, so we...
I don't remember a single person coming up and mentioning it. I'm just kidding. There was what, 400 people here? So I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, is when you say we might contract out the shelter point, how is that different than what we were talking about when the community had lots of concerns about that?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. One of the main differences, though, is we were talking about closing the Palo Alto shelter and moving to another external service provider. In this case, this is keeping the shelter within Palo Alto, and I think that that's a key component as to why there's I think significant support in this recognition that, oh my goodness, there's an opportunity to improve the shelter here within Palo Alto. So that's the main, I think that's the distinguishing difference. I would also say, though, that, and of course, hopefully, the people who speak won't entirely disagree with what I'm saying to you right now. I think this is a kind of process that we go through in our community where everybody's perspective in thinking about how to solve the problem advances in the course of discussions. So I think people realize we do have a financial challenge. People can see, my goodness, there are models of how these things operate that not only don't lose money in this regard, they're able to provide services and to have a quality of shelter in the operation that really far surpasses what we have. So I think that, more than anything, I think folks and the staff too see this not as just plugging up a hole or, resolving a deficit, but really improving and enhancing a service here in the city and an opportunity.
So just so it's clear in my mind, so what we're doing right now is we have both animal control and the animal shelter, but you're going to keep the animal shelter. What's different? I guess that's the part I'm not getting.
Okay, so to make it as simple as possible, obviously we have this shelter that receives animals in lots of different ways, and it adopts them, it does, spay, neuter, a host of services. We have our own animal control operation that responds to requests in our community and in our partner communities for whatever. It's stray dogs, but it's also other stuff. It's picking up dead animals, all sorts of things. The sense is, from our point of view, that we don't have problems with the animal control function. Actually, I think it's a high quality service, and I think that our customers think it's a high-quality service. And there's a strong relationship between the existing staff and how we do it in the department, and say, why change that model out? That works. Let's just keep it here. But the shelter's a problem. So we're now saying, okay, let's basically turn this over to somebody else. It's probably a more extreme example of what we've been talking with council about the Junior Museum and Zoo, to get funding investment to expand the Junior Museum and Zoo, to change the management relationship to some extent with the Junior Museum and Zoo. This could go further than that and actually have another not-for-profit, assume everything, and we would contract with them.
Okay, so the plan is to spend, so right now we're losing, what was it, $900,000? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, and I think the half-year cost you had would keep us on, maybe even a poor performance.
So 910,000, right? I'm going to just call it $1 million. Yep. It's easier. That way I'll remember it. So we're losing $1 million roughly, and you're looking at putting another $200,000 or $300,000 on top of that in transition costs.
That's where it's not exactly the kind of thing I like to say to the council, right? Which is say, we continue to lose more and more money. But we can fix that, but you have to lose more money than that for a while.
So again, the transition costs are for salaries, or what does the $200,000 to $300,000 go for?
I think that there are a couple of things, and again, this is a little bit fluid, but the main components are we've got to get some in-house expertise who can help structure and manage the transition, including the more detailed analysis, the scope of work, how we would go out and issue the RFPs and do the analysis, and really have a level of expertise that we don't have.
So is it hiring a consultant, or is it in-house personnel there?
Well, there's a couple of options. We haven't. Those are things we'd have to talk about. I think we would agree that there are two capacities that we need in this transition. One is we need some degree of expertise as it would relate to spinning off an operation, and that's in my view, that's either best done by a consultant or by us bringing somebody on staff who really has that expertise, who's formerly run shelters or whatever. The second is we need management capacity to manage the operation during, not only because of the transition, but because we're losing the director in 6 months. So we've got to also be backfilling that and doing other things. I think we've all agreed that from our perspective that those skills are much more management skills than they are technical animal shelter operations skills, that we have other staff to do that. And so there's always a possibility that we could end up with a combination of recommendations about, would we assign staff to do part of this rather than outsourcing it. I'd have to look at that, and one of my thoughts was to, as we work through the finance committee work, for us to be able to maybe present a number of options to you that, if there was really a concern to try to minimize the additional actual cost increases in this transition period, then we would be.
So what you're looking for us tonight is, what you're really saying is that you're still coming up with a plan, basically.
Yes.
And your estimation it'll take $200,000 to $300,000. I was going to ask you, transition period, how long are we looking at? Is it a 2-year period, a 3-year period, a 1-year period? I'm trying to get a sense of, if we're going to lose $1.3 million a year, are we losing it for 3 years? Are we losing it for 2 years? Or is that also fluid?
That's fluid. I don't think we have a good answer for that. I think clearly we recognize that there would be no way to gear up and get all of this done in less than 1 year. So we would be managing a process towards a 1-year period. Now, that being said, I'm sure the council would want us to be reporting on our progress, and it could be as we survey the marketplace and the options and timing on different alternatives, that could change. I certainly don't expect that we're going to go all the way to the end of the next year and say, oh, now we know it's going to take another year or so. I think we would know that certainly by midway through this next year, what the real time frame. Can we make it within a year or not? I will tell you, I mean, I don't like us being in this situation. I don't like losing this kind of money, and I don't mean to say that it's just about money, because it's gotten, hearing from folks in the perspective, you know, it's very clear that, and I actually put it in my letter somewhere, that the facility and the operational standards we expect in our city are not being met with our current operation. We would not apply this approach in other service areas around the city, so we need to fix it.
Okay, no, I think that's very helpful. The other comment I had on this was, I think in the big picture, when I joined the council, and you know, I think you'd been a city manager here for what, 2 years or 1 year at most?
Yes, but I mean, since we are talking about animals, there is a dog year factor to the...
The dog year factor, right, right. And, you know, when I got on the council, I think we just really started under your leadership and somewhat Lalo's, and I mean, none of you, rest of you were even here, to start investing in infrastructure. And part of me thinks this is self-inflicted as a city, is that if we'd actually spent the money and the effort and looked at the animal shelter and upgraded it, we wouldn't have lost Mountain View. And it's really the dismal state of the animal shelter that caused us to lose Mountain View. And, you know, I could see us losing Los Altos and Los Altos Hills if we don't do this correctly. And, you know, so, I mean, that's water under the bridge, but clearly we should have not let it get to the situation. And the reason I really bring that up is, you know, I know that we've now investing in our roads, I know that we've gone through our utilities and put the infrastructure, and I know we've come up with an infrastructure plan, but every now and then things like this come up. And, you know, I think of the walkway on the bridge that was down at the Baylands Interpretive Center. I mean, that's self-inflicted. We obviously didn't maintain it like we should have. As I've been on council, there's been situations where I remember we had to, they call it DSS, a piece of artwork because we didn't maintain it. And I guess what I would ask you as the city manager is to give some thought to, and this is not a criticism because I know you really are big on infrastructure and you do it, but these things come up once in a while out of the blue that we're clearly not maintaining. I have no idea what the next one is as I'd be bringing it up. This is obviously a fairly big one, but as I said, you know, it's big from the Animal Services Center to a single piece of artwork, which in effect we just basically had to throw away because we didn't maintain it. To the Baylands, you know, interpret with the pier going out, the walkway. And so I think those are three. One's really minor, one's in the middle, and one's really large. So if there are things like that out there, I'd really appreciate it if we sort of had some sort of a sense of what else we're not doing that we should be doing so we don't get into these situations like this.
Well, completely share your concern. Unfortunately, I would say that what you're describing is happening all over our country.
But we're not our country.
Right. No.
We can actually solve the infrastructure. We actually have the money.
Right. No, but both of the things that you have mentioned, they clearly did not happen overnight. They really happened over almost a generation, you know, so.
Council Member Bilson.
Hi, sorry, I have one follow-on question, and maybe you sort of answered it already with Councilmember Sharp, but is there a third option, which is a much faster and more aggressive transition to an externalization model, right? Because, I mean, the context for that is, I mean, obviously the fundamental question is what's going to serve the residents of Palo Alto best, right? If we're going to end up at the same place in a couple years or 3 years, but, you know, in the meantime, we're going to spend basically flush another $2 million down the hole or something like that. Is there a much shorter transition possible?
So I think that's an excellent point. I don't want to, I mean, by saying we see this as a year time frame and we don't know yet what the real time frame is. I don't want to sound like a bureaucrat talking. I mean, we understand the challenge and we want to move absolutely as quickly as possible. And I would say I don't think this is 100% just a management and even council decision. I think that there are interested people in our community who are quite invested in the choices we make. And so I think that all of us coming along is going to be a requirement. And so those are matters that are not under our direct control as a staff, as is what the state of the marketplace is out there. I mean, are there existing not-for-profits that would actually have the capacity to be able to say, take us up on our offer? If they do and they can do it quickly, then I promise you, I mean, our intent is to be able to make this transition as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I wonder if we could go out and hear from the public. It's been waiting eagerly. If I could ask Barry Hayes to come forward, followed by Beth Ward.
Good evening. I'm Barry Hayes. I'm a Palo Alto resident. 2 points I'd like to make. I'm a little disturbed by the characterization of losing money and flushing money down a hole and similar things. This is a municipal service, and I wouldn't expect that you would say fixing potholes is flushing money down a hole. This is a highly valued service, according to the survey, and I don't believe it should be expected to be a profit center. Second, I don't believe that there is some magic way that making this a non-city service, that somehow this will be something that Palo Alto couldn't get the expertise and run at the same level of quality and low-kill animal shelter that we would expect in Palo Alto by a nonprofit or by some other partnership. I think that we need to maintain the quality of the service we have and increase it quite a great deal at this point, but that the aspect that somehow it's our inherent inability to run this as a government service that's causing these problems. I don't believe that's true. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Ward, to be followed by Carol Hyde.
Hi, I'm Beth Ward. I'm the Vice President of Community Alliances for the Humane Society Silicon Valley. And mostly, this is a thank you. I want to thank the Office of the City Auditor for compiling the Palo Alto Animal Services audit. And we'd also like to thank the city staff and all the Animal Services Committee members that spent their time talking about this problem and helping to come up with some of the recommendations that you've heard. You created a forum that not only allowed people to share thoughts and opinions, but to engage and discuss that, and I appreciate that as a city. I've been involved with a lot of other cities and their problems and things that are going on with animals in their community, and I have not been as impressed as I was with the team that Cash put together. The Humane Society Silicon Valley supports recommendations and responses provided to the audit report by the city manager. We look forward to the next steps in the process and to contributing to find a quick and effective solution to help the animals and the people served by Palo Alto Animal Services today. And again, I want to just say thank you to everybody for putting attention to this, and I look forward to working with everybody in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Carol Hyde, to be followed by Scotty Zimmerman.
Vice Mayor and council members, I'm Carol Hyde. I'm director of the Palo Alto Humane Society, and I'm here to present the Palo Alto Humane Society's vision for a future shelter for Palo Alto. Modern shelters are community centers. They draw in the public through vibrant programs of information outreach, volunteer and community service opportunities, social activities, spay and neuter, and veterinary funding assistance, dog obedience training, and foster programs. In addition to featuring friendly and attractive animal housing and veterinary facilities, progressive shelters engage, inform, and interest the public. Family pet care festivals with animal art activities, speakers, animal care demos and movies, dog parks, lending libraries, and school field trips are some examples of community engagement activities possible with a new vision. Our vision is one that allows us to be identified with the City of Palo Alto's Animal Service Center and to have the location and space to offer self-sustaining community programs and services. With enhanced space and staffing at the shelter, Palo Alto Humane Society can offer these types of dynamic programs and services to our community. We have read the City Auditor's report. We applaud the work done, and we support the recommendations presented in the report. It will be important to involve interim and transition management that understands the potential of community programs for drawing in the public and helping to finance the shelter. Palo Alto Humane Society has submitted 2 proposals to you in an effort to explore how we could most successfully contribute to an animal shelter for Palo Alto. We realized that we could not undertake a capital campaign to fund and operate an entire facility, but we would like to participate in creating a wing and a new facility to house our programs, and we can fund the startup of a community services and education program and expand the spay-neuter income generated at the shelter. A shelter for Palo Alto must be a community center to thrive. A community center will involve the people of Palo Alto, bring them to the shelter, and encourage them to embrace the shelter as their own. With our recognized name, our experience in the community since 1908, and our community and veterinary support programs, we would like to make this vital contribution to a shelter for Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Scotty Zimmerman.
Hello, thank you. I think that's a great report. I wanted to mention, I'm with Friends of the Palo Alto Animal Shelter, and we're really amateurs, and we're forcing ourselves to get to be professionals very fast. We had a wonderful meeting with Avenidas on Monday, talked to Amy, who's their director of this huge process they're going through, got all sorts of great ideas about how to approach it, what do we need first, second, third. We're meeting tomorrow with people from Junior Museum and Zoo. These were at the suggestion of Cash. We've been touring other shelters all over the Bay Area. There are some amazing things going on in other shelters, including ways they've found to earn money. We are aware that we need to get realistic about describing what the new shelter is going to look like and going after money for it. We need a feasibility report, and we need real architects and contractors to talk to. Connie wasn't so sure that we might need an RFP before we even talk to people, but anyway. And one of the other things I just want to mention, Berkeley's shelter, the new one they have now, replaced one that had been built in 1946. And that's really old, post-war. So ours is pretty strained, but it's holding up in some ways. We want a better place for the community. We want everything Carol's talking about. Summer camp for kids, all of which can be money-earning propositions. And we want the animals to live in little homes that look so happy and contented that people come in to see the animals play, like a cat cafe. That's another place we visited. Anyway, that's really about all I have to say. I really liked everything I've heard, including Jim Keene, everybody tonight, and thank you to the auditors. That was a great report, very clear.
Thank you. Let's see if I could just ask a couple, make a couple comments. The financial figures were quite dramatic, and it's too bad that we didn't have those before while we were going through the report. It would have been helpful to give a context to it. But it is striking to see that we have been losing a substantial amount of money for a number of years. And it's one of the bases of the report. But in the report, it identified a couple factors over the last couple years that led the revenues to be substantially lower than expected. The closing down for a period of time of the neuter clinic and the dropping out of Mountain View. Now, this transition period we're talking about, I guess in the report and in the city manager's comments, I had the idea that it was a transition of not just let's get someone there and survive over the next year, but let's make some changes to make sure the clinic is running well, to make sure services are delivered with a new sense of urgency about it. And I would anticipate, rather than the cost of it being added on to the current deficit, that an effective interim manager would lower that deficit. So that's something, when you come back in May, might be very helpful to address. Is this transition leader going to be someone who can pick up some of the ideas that have been mentioned and talked about, to see how they work, to put them in practice, and see if, just given the site it is, we can still run it more effectively, so that we're not buying into a $1.3 million deficit next year, but we're seeing if effective management can lower that just to some extent. Practical question, when does this come back to Finance Committee? You're talking about splitting it off from the police. Would we expect it to come back with the police, which is in the first week?
Right. It's right now we're scheduled for May 7th. That's the evening that we discuss the police budget with you, and we would then...
Okay, I guess that's a very busy meeting with the discussion of the police, of the fire, and other things, as well as the animal services. So it's a big meeting.
Yeah, and it's a big topic, and I just to put a little context into the discussion, at one point the council had discussed having a goal of knowing goal that we would be at about a $500,000 deficit. So it's almost doubling that amount, right? But I think what you're stating is very much in our plans. And one of the things is we rather tell you what it could be and work on trying to make it lower and better, because there could be situations or components that maybe we could take care of sooner, as Councilmember Fields has said. Maybe there's some opportunities for some of the items that pop up.
And part of the deficit is the animal control, which is not self-paying, but rather a contribution to the city.
So I think we need to be clear on that and separate that for you, so you can understand what that is. And that control in itself will, not cover itself, but it's part of the function that we need to have. And so a lot of that is state mandated.
Yeah, to be clear what we're subsidizing and by how much. Just a notion, I mean, we talked about reaching out to services and partnerships. I don't see any mention of the local interests. I was surprised to see the number that only 55% of the users of the site are Palo Alto residents. And you talk to neighbors about it, and they say, oh yeah, I don't use that very much because I have my own vet. I go to the stores for my supplies and advice. I even get my pets at other places. So what about getting the whole animal group together, which would include vets, vet hospitals, breeders, stores? All these people have a big interest in a healthy animal services world in Palo Alto, of which our center is one. And should we be forming partnerships? Should they be contributing to a healthy animal services center? So what's their role in it, and how do we get them in? Another role, I mean, we have the problem is we're on the border, and San Mateo County is providing animal services for the county. Is there a way of us becoming a provider to the county when they redo their plan in 2016? Can we say, gee, it's natural that maybe Menlo Park or EPA could get some of their services from Palo Alto? One of the striking things in the survey was people don't want to go very far. And if we have EPA and Menlo Park 5 miles, 4 miles away, why aren't they our partners? And can't we work out something with the county of San Mateo to build our service area around us, not to the side of us? So those are just some considerations. I guess that critical question that has to be addressed up front, and is really the first, is what kind of interim arrangement are we going to make? And can we make it a dynamic interim arrangement where we can experiment and try new revenue generating things, new partnerships, be reaching out, and find out who in the community might be an investor in something. If we can get some notions, visions of design, where would it be? What would it look like? How big would it be? Who would be the participants? Those are things up front that would be necessary really to sell partnerships. So what can we do quickly in those regards? So those are my thoughts. Council members? Eric, do you have anything?
Well, I think the city auditors identified sort of the major challenges here, and you know, financial obviously is a huge one, right? I think the auditor's office has also underscored the importance of the importance of how hard it is to manage these things. These things are not trivial to manage, and there is sort of a known working model for these things in the region, and it's characterized by, and it's very private kind of thing. It's characterized by, you know, an executive team that spends a huge amount of time fundraising, right? And they raise millions of dollars, right? Relatively low cost structure for everybody else, and huge numbers of volunteers and so forth. They spend a huge amount of time doing outreach and aggressive adoption programs and pet fairs and so forth, right? And they just barely make it, right? And a lot of those things are, you know, it's historically not the model that you know you tend to find a lot of in governments, right? So I think having the right kind of management people and so forth is going to be critical to make this successful. And I think, you know, as we look for a solution to this, I think we need to be, you know, we need to really clear that we're focused on, you know, bringing that kind of environment to the long-term solution here, and the short term if we can. And finding those kinds of people, again, you know, we're going to be affected by retirements and so forth. We shouldn't underestimate the challenge. You know, I had some personal association a few years back with a wildlife rescue. They had a management change and basically destroyed the place. So these things are not trivial to manage, and I think we shouldn't underestimate the challenge of that as we go forward. Thanks.
Councilmember Scharf?
No, I made my comments.
I guess the question is, do we need to have a motion to accept the report? I think everybody has stated they were very...
The motion is actually to recommend to council to accept the report.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, that is moved by Councilmember Ilse, seconded by Councilmember Scharf. Anything else you need tonight? I guess we look forward to May 7th, where you come back with concrete budget proposals to make the transition work. Anything else you need tonight?
No, Mr. Chairman, but could I make a couple of comments
Yeah.
just in response to the public and actually some of the council comments? So I don't, you know, it's still too early to say, and even the decisions that we make during the budget process will we'll have to sharpen our pencils as the year goes on and we look at the transition. I'd be a little bit worried about overstating our ability to lower the deficit. That isn't because I don't want to have that intention. The auditor's office and our folks have done some preliminary assessments of some different services or things that we could do, and for the most part, the cost-benefit analysis, I mean, it yields very small scale improvements in this time frame, so it doesn't really kind of get us out of the hole. Secondly, I don't think we can ignore the limitations that our existing operation place on it. I mean, it's not just, I mean, the condition of the shelter, the amount of space, and the conditions are factors in our ability to make this thing work. So the real solutions are embedded with, you know, a new shelter coming into existence. Lastly, I think your points about location are important. So location's both an advantage and a disadvantage for us here. But clearly an improved facility as a draw. I mean, really, I could be overstating this, but you know, I think that so much of the draw, I mean, to some extent there's a draw because it's convenient for some folks. For others, it's just, there's just a strong emotional attachment and love for having the shelter here in Palo Alto. So people are willing to go and actually, you know, work through the deficiencies we have. But other folks won't necessarily do that. So as we could really upgrade this, then the ability to make it work is a lot better. The last thing I just did want to say is I don't want to leave any feeling that this is some sort of profit motivation that we're dealing with. There's no attempt to run this as a profit center, and we don't expect that would be the case. And we provide many services, critical services in this community that the city either does not directly provide or is not subsidized by general folk. I mean, water, wastewater, refuse, senior services, all of those things are operated with a way of sort of saying, there is a way to price things to make things work and to do it better. But I think lastly was the really, I don't mean to say the meat of the auditor's report, and you've pointed it out. It's very clear that the ability to fundraise for capital and operations works in the other model, and it's really, really difficult in a municipal model. And you know, to ignore that possibility, that potential, which would say, well, let's subsidize it by taking from other city services when we have a model that will work better. Just, you know, I think we're striking the right balance here with this recommendation about how we can go forward in the future. So, thank you.
Good, thank you. And I think everyone appreciated the value of the audit report and the cooperation between the city staff and the audit function around it. And hopefully we all can move ahead together to achieve some of the goals and targets outlined in front of us. If there are no other comments, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. And we look forward to early May, where we'll come back with some concrete numbers. Let's see. That brings us to the last item on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I have a lot of staff reports for the council release tonight to do, and Lalo says, CFO says he thinks he's capable of supporting you.
Yes, thank you.
See you guys.
Now, the goal of this is really not to have staff do anything, it's just amongst ourselves. The budget process is one of the ones that is most attractive to me because it starts with the long-range financial forecast and the financial report and statement. And Those take place in the Finance Committee, but none of the three of us were here during that. And I thought it might be good just to spend 5 minutes amongst ourselves to identify things in those reports that might be helpful and useful for us as we approach the budget items, so we could share with each other and help anticipate where our colleagues might be when we move on to the budget items. So, colleagues, do you want me to go first since it was my idea?
Yes. Sure. By acclamation.
It's only fitting.
Okay, let me find my notes. So much stuff.
So while you do that, I'll just start for a second. So you're going to be bringing us back a zero-based budget, right? No. Bummer.
Well, let me chime in to Councilman Scharf. It's a partial zero-based budget. It is in a way that how we build it on the personnel side. It's definitely zero-based, how we really build it up. But it's not a zero-based where we say, let's erase everything and everybody has to re-justify everything. We don't do that.
Got it.
We'll bring you a balanced budget, how's that?
Okay, if I could just mention two things that I've talked about a lot and will carry with me as we go into the budget. The first of them is the valuation of pension benefits. I noted when the long-term financial forecast came out in December to the Finance Committee, it contained with it the actuary's view of the pension liabilities. And there was a 60, 70-page report on that, and this is an issue that has been important for us for years. And the Finance Committee is scheduled to discuss that in September. But I guess I just wanted to say, I think it is striking and important that when you look at the 10-year financial forecasts, our benefit rates grow twice as fast as our salaries. And that does not seem to be a long-term sustainable way of attracting the best young workers into city government. And how we value that and how we deal with it, how we make sure that we are paying the cost of current workers, even when they're retired, we're not pushing the cost of that down into the future, is important as we address each item on our budget. It might affect how you think about the size of each department as we look at it. So that's one thing I certainly will carry along. Second thing that I think is very important is the property tax. Property tax makes up 35% of our tax revenue. It's grown from 28 to 35%. Just as important, it makes up for over 80% of the school budget, and it accounts for 90% of the county's tax revenue. So what we do with property tax and how we generate property tax is extremely important to the budgets of local government. And I have noted quite often that over the last 5 years, while the office sector has been growing so quickly in town, the share of the non-resident payment of property funds has fallen from 30 to 25%. So it indicates that the utilization of use tax, where those who benefit directly from something pay for that, is something that might be a more appropriate way of looking at funding some of the what are currently general fund activities. So that's another thing I would be carrying with me as we look at department budgets. Okay, is there anything else, Councilmember Filseth, you'd like to share?
I have something. If you find any errors in this, because it's incredibly simplified, right? It's my fault, it's not the city's fault. But per our discussion, I was interested in the relationship between, so last year the city ran a $6 million operating surplus. This year we're projected to run a $1.5 million operating surplus, and I think it goes to zero. I think, a couple of years from now, it sort of bounces around break even, right? And I was curious about the relationship of the expected return of CalPERS pension investments on the city's operating surplus or deficit. And so I actually took a shot at that. And
This is Walter Rossman, Budget Director. First, Councilman Filseth, it is correct the city is projecting for fiscal year 2015 a surplus right now of $5 million. But this is a one-time surplus. So basically the way we budget primarily in ongoing dollars with ongoing revenues.
Yep.
The surpluses you see in the forecast are all ongoing surpluses and deficits there. So just a clear differentiation there. The forecast does assume the increasing benefits cost per CalPERS. And actually what we did is we only have 5 years of data for that. And we projected out the same incremental increase that CalPERS gave us for the following 5 years.
Right, I understand. And so let me explain for a second here what I did, and I'll try not to be too verbose and take too long on this, but obviously the projection of the impact of investment returns on CalPERS is an incredibly complex actuarial kind of thing, right? And far beyond, I mean, that's why you have specialists do it, right? And so I tried to take a very simple first order whack at that using their numbers. And basically, they try to encapsulate all the potential variables of, aging and demographics and salary increases and so forth and all that stuff. And they try to encapsulate it into a projection of contribution rates for at various different levels of investment returns. And so basically I tried to use those and predict what the bottom line impact of, this is a very, very simplistic way to do it, right? But a bottom line impact of a change in the investment returns and on what the contribution rate for the city would be for, basically the current year, right? And come up with a number based on that. And so it looks to me like I picked $6 million as the target because that's what the surplus was last year. And it looked to me like if you assumed a 7% return this year, okay, then the contribution rate for the miscellaneous employee and the public safety employees rates would go to 0.32 and 0.493, and this is a simple interpolation between the 2 points that they gave. And therefore, we'd come up about $6 million less if you, and again, their assumption is what's the rate forever, not just this year. So if you assumed that the rate forever was 7%, right, then it would cost us $6 million this year, okay? And so basically, that would wipe out the gain from last year, right?
Good.
And then I tried to project, and then even more aspirational, try to project what that would add up into in the long term, because, I assumed that if we lost $6 million this year, and it's probably not too much different next year, right? I mean, general fund's about the same size, expenses are about the same size, and so forth. They've already factored in all the demographics and the increases in benefits and so forth, right? So then I sort of said, well, it's probably $6 million for a long time, right? And what would that up to over time, and what would the net present value of that be? And so that ends up being not $50, $100 million or something like that. So my net conclusion from all this, right, and I'll shut up in a second here, is that the size of our operating surplus or deficit is pretty darn sensitive to that number. I mean, little changes, whether it's 7.5% or 7.25% or 7%, it's a big deal, right? And so I worry about that a lot. And so I think we should, be cognizant. I mean, we're obviously cognizant of that, but I think it's, it's really important. And this doesn't include OPEB this is just pension, not health care and all the other kind of stuff, right? So that was my whack at that.
Great,
So.
thank you. Councilmember Shar.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that work. We've actually had those discussions on several times.
We did.
So yeah, obviously that's a real issue. I think the one stupid thing I had to complain about was I couldn't find where we put in the long-range financial forecast the revenues and expenses together, so I don't have to go back from one sheet to the other. I found that really difficult. I mean, so.
Yeah, you only have the roll up. If you look on page 3, you just have all revenues and all expenditures together and the difference between those two. But if you look for the detail, they're not rolled up.
Okay, yeah, but I sort of wanted the detail.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, because,
yeah.
No, I think this is a really good process, the long-range forecast for us. So I was actually really intrigued by the fact when I looked at, and that's why it was a little hard for me, and I was looking at the detail about the cost drivers. So if we go to the revenues, right? The revenues are, they're going ahead and increasing.
What page on?
Page 19, right? And you guys have a fairly good confidence, at least for the next couple of years in that, right? I mean, I would say that, right? And then we look at the what our expenditures actually are. And so little things stuck out at me. We're doing a big jump in not contracting out services. We're going from 17 million to 14 million. I was sort of surprised by that. Are those contracted services like paying on the golf course and, that we don't use our employees? Or is that didn't really make sense to me. I mean, because I didn't see a huge jump in our salaries, so I assumed we weren't hiring all that many more people to cover that. So intuitively, I was just confused by that.
We'll have to take a look at all the details, but I know we had quite a few one-time items that we were adding in the 15 budget, so we'll have to give you some of the details as to what we added. I'm thinking of.
So overall, I'd say I was pleased by the 2016. I mean, you don't have the salaries going up by more than, it's less than $1 million, right? I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure that tracks completely with the labor negotiations I see going on.
Well, actually, there's one major change there which we made in the budgeting process. We habitually in the past have budgeted positions at step 5, but we actually did analysis and we realized we bring people on the average into the organization at step 3. So we brought vacant positions down to step 3. Same thing with managed, professional employees, just a budget midpoint. So you see this actually when you see the budget next week, but the fire department had a very interesting situation that the salary and benefits cost for fire actually went down in 16 because they have a bunch of vacancies. And they have a lot of low entry-level positions right now. They just hired recruits last year. So it's just, these are anomalies, how we're trying to refine the budgeting process, and that's what you're seeing right here.
And so that sort of artificially masks or a little bit or lowers those costs is really what you're saying. Because a lot of these costs were surprisingly down. I mean, I was surprised the contract services, were going down from 2015 to 2016. I noticed that supplies and materials, hey, glad to see everyone's using less paper clips. I mean, I was sort of surprised that we're going down.
So it is indeed true what Lalo is saying. It's a one-time expenditures from C15, which the council approved. We're taking those out, and those were a lot in consultant services, and that's why you see a reduction in those areas.
Okay. So that's what it looked to me like. Most of these things had reductions in them. So, I mean, I was pleased to see that. I just didn't really believe it, so,
Well, your hunch is somewhere right, because every year, as you know, you're going to get a multitude of budget amendments as you go, and then that gets added, and then it balances somewhat out.
As long as the revenues are always higher, too. All right, thank you.
Great. If there are no other, let's see, the next thing on our agenda is the future agendas, and we're all set for May.
Can I just pass this out to you really quick? I wanted to go over.
Yes, we'll have to officially close the meeting, and we can talk informally.
Thank you. Since the meeting is closed, I'll send you an email and remind you that those are the dates that we have and times and items, confirm with you and the rest of the committee, Vice Mayor, to see if there's any conflicts going forward. I believe there were some conflicts, and so I'd like to ensure that we have a quorum, at least 3 of you for each of the budget hearings. If we don't, then see if the mayor can fill in.
Yeah, I will check with my colleagues and make sure that's true.
Okay.
I guess on the 7th, then, we've added animal services, which is likely to be a big discussion.
I apologize that it's not called out, but it's our internal document for us. Police includes animal services.
Yeah, it's still with the police department. But that'll make Thursday, the 7th, a big, long discussion.
Yes. The one last piece that I'll email you with is that City Manager Keene is not available on May 21st. And so we were considering maybe May 20th, but I'll email you that information.
May 20th, which is a Monday.
I'm sorry.
Wednesday, the 20th.
Should be a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, and it's good to see you back, Lala.